I'll get your boss to fire you. He said it like he was ordering a martini, smooth, smug, with just enough venom to let me know he thought he'd already won. I didn't flinch, didn't even look up from the pitch folder. Just closed it, folded my hands, and turned to the man sitting 3 seats over. Dad, I said evenly, should I leave? That's when the oxygen left the room. 3 investors froze mid-blink. One woman from Ridgebrook Partners actually set her pen down like it had burned her fingers. And the lead investor, Grant Mallory, the guy writing the biggest check of his firm's year, snapped his leather-bound notebook shut like it was the end of a sermon. He looked at my father, CEO Gregory Foster, then at Chase Whitaker, our new strategic VP hire, and said flatly, "Is this your A-team?" Chase opened his mouth. Nothing came out, just the faint whoosh of his ego deflating like a flat soda. My father's face was a wax statue, expression frozen somewhere between surprise and indigestion. And I just smiled like someone watching a fire they didn't start, but sure as hell weren't going to put out. You ever feel a boardroom go from overpriced coffee and name tags to pure courtroom energy? That was the vibe. The interns at the back practically fused with the drywall. One of the junior analysts coughed and immediately regretted existing. Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying this already, maybe hit that subscribe button. Only takes a second, but it helps the team keep stories like this rolling, and trust me, this one gets real spicy. Also, don't forget to like. That's the fuel that keeps the petty corporate vengeance train on the rails. Anyway, back to the wreckage. See, Chase didn't realize he'd picked a fight with someone who built the entire $100 million pitch from scratch. The investor pipeline, that was my baby. I had been growing that lead for 2 years, watering it with cross-border compliance reports and 7 a.m. partner syncs. Chase had been here, 3 weeks, maybe 4. And suddenly he's slapping his name on my deck like he wrote it during a juice cleanse in Malibu. He was a transplant, hired in during some executive reorg nonsense. Glossy resume, perfect teeth, came from a firm that nosedived after their AI modeling turned out to be a glorified Excel sheet with a font upgrade. My dad, who I'll admit is brilliant, but also allergic to confrontation, thought Chase would add gravitas to our pitch. What Chase added was grammatical errors, incorrect revenue forecasts, and a partner name misspelled so badly I thought it was a new market entry. But I didn't say a damn word. Not when Chase accidentally forwarded my strategy draft to the wrong list and blamed Google glitches. Not when he called me kiddo in a meeting with 2 VPs from Zurich. Not even when he told the CFO I was more operations than vision, like I hadn't architected the entire damn GTM funnel with my eyes closed and a migraine. But this, telling me during the pitch that he'd get my boss to fire me, that's when the mask slipped. That's when I stopped playing nice. See, Chase didn't know that I'd been documenting. Every edit he made to the deck, logged. Every email he sent taking credit for my work, archived. Every financial projection he altered without vetting. I had the original files, the timestamps, and the internal Slack pings where I asked, "Are we sure about this?" And he replied, "Just trust me, sweetie." I trusted him the same way I trust gas station sushi. When he whispered that threat, thinking he'd rattle me, what he actually did was hand me the match. Because what nobody in that room knew, not even my dad, was that I'd already set the fuse days ago. And in about 20 minutes, right around slide 16, the whole damn thing was going to blow. It started with an email that hit like a car alarm at 2 a.m. Urgent, misspelled, and CC'd to way too many people. Subject, strategic realignment for upcoming investor engagements, the kind of subject line that reeks of consultant perfume and HR coffee breath. I clicked, already bracing for nonsense. And there it was, a tidy little chart that realigned responsibilities for the $100M pitch. My name slid all the way down from strategic lead pipeline and partnerships to support analyst insights and logistics. Support, analyst. I read it twice, like maybe the pixels would rearrange themselves into something less insulting. They didn't. 5 minutes later, my inbox pinged again. This time, it was from Chase. "Hey Linda, wanted to get ahead of any confusion. With the board bringing me in to freshen up the team's approach, we thought it best to have you focus on what you're great at, keeping things tight behind the scenes. Your continuity will be key. Appreciate you staying in your lane here. It'll really help the optics." No punctuation on that last sentence, by the way. The man couldn't even gaslight me with proper grammar. I stared at my screen so long the auto-sleep kicked in. Then I walked to the break room and poured myself the last of the coffee, the burnt, end of the pot sludge that matched my mood. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood there with the cup steaming in my hands, listening to the fluorescent lights hum like they were trying to apologize for the building. Because the part that really cracked me wasn't Chase. It wasn't even the demotion. It was my father. He called me into his office that afternoon, didn't even look up from his monitor when he said, "I'm not thrilled with it either, but you know how this looks. The board's already edgy about nepotism. If I override the change, it'll be war. War." As if I hadn't spent the past 6 years winning wars for this company. As if I hadn't flown red-eyes to Seoul and back just to land a single partner for our Asia-Pacific rollout. As if I hadn't missed birthdays, anniversaries, and at least one breakup, because this job needed me more than anyone else did. He folded his hands and said, "It's temporary. Chase just needs space to prove himself." I almost laughed, like this was some sort of executive puberty, and I was just supposed to wait for the hormones to settle. So I nodded, said nothing, walked out of his office and back to mine. And that's when I opened my private OneDrive, started a folder, named it Continuity. Inside, screenshots, emails, original pitch decks, meeting notes, draft memos, everything. Every client interaction Chase took credit for, logged. Every mistake he made that I corrected quietly, timestamped. I didn't tell anyone, didn't hint, didn't pout. I just became a ghost with a spreadsheet. While Chase paraded through meetings like a frat president running for student council, I sat in the back, nodding, smiling, quietly pulling receipts from the archives, like a librarian preparing for war. The funny thing about being underestimated, people stop watching you, which is exactly when you start to see everything. Like how he changed our cost per lead figures without checking with finance, how he name-dropped a partner we hadn't spoken to in 9 months, then called it a closed lead in front of the investors. I flagged the errors privately, of course, slid notes to my father during review meetings. He read them, said good catch, then moved on like he'd found a typo in a menu, so I stopped trying to save them. Let the train roll, let the pitch fall apart. All I had to do was wait, because Chase didn't know the clause buried in the investor deck, know about the sign-off trail. Didn't know the analyst he just benched had written every clause, every footnote, and every landmine, and one of them was about to explode. Tuesday, 9:14 a.m. The kind of morning where the coffee tastes like burnt hope and the fluorescent lights buzz just a little too loud, like even the ceiling was annoyed to be there. Chase was already holding court in conference room B, strutting around in a blazer that looked like it cost more than my first car, palms up like he was hosting a game show instead of a weekly team sync. And that, folks, is how we locked down the Walker Group. Vision, precision, initiative. The room erupted into polite applause. Even the interns clapped. My fingers were still damp from rinsing out his water bottle at the sink. BPA-free. Labeled with his initials in case the world forgot who he was. I stepped back into the room mid-cheer, bottle in hand, and watched him wink at the VP of sales, like they'd just tag-teamed the biggest account of Q4. The Walker Group had taken 14 months of sweat and follow-ups and bilingual midnight Zooms with their procurement director in Geneva. I was the one who learned the CEO's son had a peanut allergy and sent a no-nuts snack box before the third call. I had gotten them to say yes. Chase hadn't even been hired when they signed the initial MOU. "Big win for the whole team," he said, taking the bottle from my hand without looking at me. "But sometimes you need someone willing to drive the bus through the fog, you know? Yeah, right off a cliff." He tilted the bottle back like it was champagne and motioned toward the slides behind him. "What we're building here, it's more than a pitch. It's a movement, a new way of thinking." I took my seat, smiled, nodded like the rest of them. But something inside me calcified right there between the line about fresh energy and the second round of applause. This wasn't just disrespect. This was erasure, and I was done playing nice. After the meeting, I went back to my desk and popped open the secure pitch archive. Not the main doc, the one Chase had been butchering since he arrived. No, I went for the version that lived 2 layers down in the permissions tree. The one with the original timestamps, IP edit logs, and embedded change records. I downloaded everything. Created a separate folder labeled Walker Group Chain, dated it, password locked it, uploaded it to a private cloud vault only legal and I had access to. No fanfare, no email trails, just insurance. From there, I logged into the CRM, screenshotted the lead generation history. All entries under my name, from the cold call to the pre-negotiation deck. Even pulled the Slack chat where Chase asked Walker who. 2 weeks before the board decided to put him in front of them. That one I printed, on company letterhead. By noon, he was bouncing past my desk like a golden retriever in a startup hoodie, asking the marketing lead to drop some fireworks into slide 9. Whatever that meant. I said nothing. Let him think he was soaring. Let him think I was invisible. I'd already forgotten the meeting where I set up the Walker Group intro, the notes I wrote, the call summaries I translated, the late-night phone call I fielded from the CFO's executive assistant after their VPN collapsed, and I walked her through restoring access with my phone wedged between my shoulder and cheek while frying an egg at midnight. He'd forgotten all of it, but I hadn't. That moment in the conference room, standing there like a glorified assistant while he soaked in applause for my work, that was the line in the sand. I'd kept the peace out of respect for the team, for my dad, for the deck. But Chase had made one thing clear. He wasn't going to stop until I was gone or gutted. So I stopped trying to be a team player and started preparing like a survivor, because I knew something Chase didn't. You don't get to erase the person who built the bridge while you're standing on it. When it collapses, nobody looks at the dirt. They look at who signed off. 2 weeks to go before the investor meeting, and the pitch deck looked like it had been assaulted by a drunk toddler with a PowerPoint fetish. Slide 3, the revenue trajectory graph, reversed axis, made it look like our growth was shrinking. Slide 7, client endorsements. Chase replaced real quotes with vague garbage like incredible vision and innovative team, kind of fluff that screams we made this up in the elevator. And slide 16, which I had handcrafted with every strategic partner and their regional breakdown, now featured 2 dead companies, one typo so bad it turned a Swiss firm into a deli, and an emerging market initiative Chase invented on the spot. When I flagged it, he didn't even look up from his laptop, just raised one manicured hand and said, "Let the grown-ups handle it, Linda." Let the grown-ups? I was 36. I held 2 MBAs and had closed more 7-figure contracts than he had teeth-whitened photos on LinkedIn. But sure, let the grown-ups handle it. I didn't say a word, just stepped back, folded my hands, and watched them mutilate my work like it was a group craft project. He even changed the font. Like our investors were going to be so dazzled by Garamond, they'd forget the numbers were wrong. The numbers were so wrong. On slide 10, Chase had inflated one of our European partnerships by 38%. I knew because I'd spent the last quarter neck deep in their back-end forecasts and was on a WhatsApp thread with their COO, who happened to be skiing in the Alps and still somehow responded faster than our internal team. I flagged it. Quietly, of course. Used a comment bubble. The next day, the slide was still wrong, but my comment had been deleted. So I made my own version of the deck, quietly, with all the original figures and timeline metadata intact. I watermarked it internal use only and saved it to a private directory under an innocuous label, Quarterly Review Draft C Legacy. Only 3 people had access to that directory: myself, our legal counsel, and the CFO, who never checked it anyway. Then I opened a blank email. To myself, CC, legal@dynastructuregroup.com subject. Original deck edits plus metadata log, confidential. I attached the file. No body text, no commentary, just the truth with timestamps. Then I hit send, because it wasn't just about revenge anymore. I was looking at a runaway train heading for a cliff. The lies in that deck weren't harmless fluff. They were compliance red flags, legal liabilities, SEC waking, clawback triggering bombs. Chase was just decorating them with emoji bullet points and calling it narrative framing. I tried once more. In the war room that afternoon, while Chase was pitching narrative flow, I printed out the clean version of slide 16 and handed it to my dad. Quietly, no drama, just a paper nudge across the table with the corrected partner list. He looked down, read it, then folded it in half, set it beside his phone, and moved on. It was the last time I tried to involve him directly. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was past that. Something colder had settled in, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. My father had made his choice again. Chase was the shiny distraction the board wanted. I was the engine they were ignoring. So be it. Let them drive the train. Let them speed toward that cliff. All I had to do was show the investors who had really been holding the map. I found it late on a Thursday, buried 26 pages deep into the investor engagement agreement, right after the usual boilerplate about arbitration jurisdiction and non-disclosure protocols. Clause 14.7b. Any material misrepresentation of client partnerships or portfolio relationships by a presenting officer shall result in immediate forfeiture of all pending performance-based equity or discretionary bonus compensation. Read it twice, then 3 more times. It was a quiet kind of beautiful, not a flashy trapdoor clause, not some smoking gun email, just gravity, sitting there in Times New Roman, waiting for someone dumb enough to lean over the edge. And Chase, he'd already jumped. The numbers he cooked into the deck, the exaggerated partner affiliations, the misleading deal statuses, the invented pending expansion markets, all of it qualified under that clause. Every damn slide he touched had his signature at the bottom of the change log. That wasn't just sloppiness. That was liability. All I had to do was make sure he owned it. The next morning, I printed out the final approved version of the deck he insisted we use, wrong numbers and all, and clipped it with a standard executive sign-off sheet. There were 4 lines: legal, CFO, CEO, and strategic VP. Watched from across the bullpen as Chase swaggered in late with an Acai smoothie, barking about fonts again. When he finally sat down, I dropped the folder on his desk. "This just needs your signature," I said, calm as a librarian. He didn't even read it, just grabbed a pen, scribbled his name, and said, "Finally someone on this team understands efficiency." He handed it back without a second glance. I walked away without a smile. Back at my desk, I scanned the document, filed it in the continuity vault under deck approval signed, and emailed a read-only copy to legal, BCC again, no commentary. Let the trail stay clean. Let the paper speak for itself. Then, I opened the deck and navigated to slide 16. That slide had become a battleground. What used to be a clean table of confirmed strategic partnerships was now a bloated mess of aspirational nonsense. One firm we hadn't spoken to in 6 months, another that ghosted us after legal review, and one named Chase literally pulled off a podcast guest list and called Emerging Synergy. I didn't delete anything. Instead, I scrolled to the bottom right corner of the slide and inserted a new footnote in 9-point font. Barely noticeable. Footnote 4, see Appendix E for original client communication log and partnership confirmation criteria, per 14.7b. Appendix E didn't exist. Yet, the investors would ask. That was the whole point. Because if they asked, I'd be ready. And if they didn't, legal still had everything. The moment the equity conversation came up, the clause would speak louder than I ever could. This wasn't just about catching him lying anymore. This was about building the scaffolding of truth so well that when it collapsed on him, nobody could say they didn't see the cracks coming. Later that afternoon, Chase called a team-wide sync. He had a big show of walking through the vision narrative of the pitch. Called it a choreography of influence. Said we were no longer presenting a deck, we were telling an origin story of dominance. He clicked through the slides like a game show host, pausing only to nod at his own ideas. When slide 16 came up, I held my breath. He didn't even see the footnote. Of course he didn't, but one of the investors would. And when they did, the clause would do the talking. 7:43 p.m. The night before the pitch. Most of the office had emptied out hours ago, save for a few poor souls in finance nursing Red Bulls and recalculating projections no one would read. The cleaning crew was humming somewhere down the hall. And I was still there, alone under the low whine of a dying ceiling light, building a paper trail so tight it could choke a pension fund. I was halfway through printing what would be the 9th version of the investor deck when the notification popped up on Slack. Chase W. just sent out the rehearsal video to our investor list. Figured it's good to plant a few seeds before tomorrow. My blood didn't even stir. Just clicked the link and watched the smirking mess unfold on my second monitor. Chase sat in front of the big conference room screen like he was about to host a late-night infomercial. The pitch he delivered? A Frankenstein of half-true numbers, buzzwords he didn't understand, and at least 2 major factual errors. First, he claimed we were actively expanding into South Korea. We weren't. We hadn't even cleared the KISA compliance hurdle yet. Then he said our core partnerships spanned 12 enterprise-level verticals. That number was 5, and 2 of them were barely verticals. It was a pilot program with a logistics firm whose name he mispronounced so badly I winced. But the worst part? He ended the video with, "Can't wait to show you all what we've built. This has been my vision since day one." My vision. The bile didn't rise. That part of me had shut off days ago. I was past rage, past disappointment. I was ice in a business suit. I minimized the video, finished printing the final versions of the deck, each one marked, time-stamped, matched to its corresponding metadata. Slide 16, as always, had the footnote. Footnote 4 had its own folder now. That folder had an encrypted mirror. That mirror had a backdoor I sent to legal via an anonymous link. Then, I printed the deck he signed. The one with the clause trigger. I slid it into a red folder marked Confidential Officer Sign Materials and placed it inside a second envelope. I sealed it, double-checked the label, stared at it for a moment before slipping it into my father's briefcase, which was parked outside his office like a golden retriever waiting for a ride home. I didn't add a note. He'd find it, or someone would make him. At 8:32 p.m., my dad walked past my door. He paused for a second, didn't knock, didn't say a word. Just stood there, watching me under the sick light of a desk lamp, then kept walking. His footsteps echoed down the hall like he was leaving the scene of something he didn't want to admit was a crime. I didn't look up. He had made his choice. And so had I. Before I left, I backed up the folders one last time. Saved them to a clean drive, labeled it Q4 reference like I was some obedient little analyst prepping for review season. Then I tucked it into the lining of my laptop bag. By the time I stepped out into the night, the city smelled like damp concrete and second chances. Somewhere in the distance, a delivery truck hit a pothole and cursed into the darkness. I walked to my car in silence. Tomorrow was pitch day. Chase thought he'd stolen the spotlight. What he didn't know, I built the damn stage, and I just handed the lighting crew a fuse. We were 27 minutes into the pitch when I knew Chase was sinking. Not drowning, sinking. Drowning implies flailing, fighting back, gasping for air. But Chase, he was going down in slow, syrupy motion, like a luxury yacht sliding off its trailer because someone forgot to tighten the winch. He stood at the head of the conference table, flanked by two massive digital screens like some kind of executive messiah. But the confidence was cracking. You could hear it in his voice, just a little too fast, a little too high. He mispronounced Deutsche Telekom as Douche Telekom. One of the investors smirked and whispered something to his associate, who scribbled a note in a leather-bound journal, so expensive it probably had its own mortgage. Slide 12 came up. Chase talked about pipeline velocity like it was a speedometer and not a calculated metric. Then, slide 14. He credited a partner collaboration that was actually a terminated vendor. I watched as Dana Park from Fenwick Equity raised one eyebrow so high it nearly escaped her face. And then, slide 16. The slide. The one I'd footnoted, the one he had mangled with half-truths and ghost accounts. I sat perfectly still as he clicked through and started his usual spiel. Our confirmed partner affiliations now span 12 major verticals, including our newest cross-market synergy with, he paused, because even he wasn't sure how to pronounce the next name. He glanced at the screen. Cressida Systems, he said, except the name wasn't Cressida, it was Cressida. He transposed the letters in the deck, misspelled the partner's name, the same partner whose CEO was sitting right there, across from me at the end of the table. The CEO blinked, tapped his pen, looked sideways at his assistant. I waited a beat, then leaned forward slightly and said, just loud enough to carry, it's Cressida, with an I. Chase turned his head so fast I thought he might sprain something. His smile didn't even reach his eyes. Thanks, Linda, he hissed through clenched teeth, voice a sharp whisper meant for me and unfortunately the entire front row. Maybe stay in your lane, there it was. The line, the moment. The exact words he'd used before, back when he reshuffled the deck, cut my lead roll, told me to focus on continuity. This time, he said it with an audience. I smiled, closed my folder, and with all the calm in the world, turned to my father, sitting silent at the head of the table, and said, Dad, should I leave? Chase's face drained of color. The silence in the room was not silence. It was compression, like the moment before a bomb goes off. The lead investor, Grant Mallory, snapped his notebook shut like he was sealing a coffin. He looked at my father, then back at Chase, said it with all the disdain of a man who'd seen this story play out before. Is this your A-team? Nobody spoke, not even my dad. Chase opened his mouth, but whatever words he thought were coming didn't show up for work. He just stared at me like I'd ripped open the floor and he was waiting for the fall. The room was watching now, not the deck, not the screens, me. I leaned back in my chair, calm as a loaded gun. Because in 5 minutes, someone was going to ask about the pipeline. And when they did, the footnote would light the fuse, and the pretty little castle Chase built from lies and borrowed numbers wouldn't survive the next slide. Let's rewind that slide, Mallory said, his tone clipped, polite, but laced with the quiet menace of someone who doesn't like being lied to on a Thursday morning after flying in on a red-eye. Chase hesitated, hand hovering over the clicker like it was suddenly radioactive. "Of course," he said, chuckling awkwardly. "Happy to circle back. Slide 16, core partnerships, full scope. One of our proudest builds. This pipeline's been under my direction since inception." And just like that, he pulled the pin. The lie wasn't new. He'd said versions of it in smaller meetings, offhand comments, always vague enough to be ignored. But now, in front of a dozen investors, a CEO, a live recorder, and 2 lawyers in the corner, he said it plainly. I didn't flinch, just reached down, lifted the folder from my briefcase, and passed it, without a word, to Grant Mallory. He looked at it, surprised, flipped the cover open. Inside, a full timeline of the pipeline's creation. Every document, every partner contact, meeting invite, call log, Slack transcript, and CRM export, all under my name, all time-stamped, all printed on firm letterhead. The cover sheet, each strategic partner pipeline, origination and documentation timeline prepared by L. Foster. Chase squinted across the table like maybe he'd misheard something. "What is that?" he asked, voice climbing. "Timeline, revisions, IP logs," I said, eyes forward. Mallory's pen hovered in the air. "So you created the original pipeline?" he asked, but not to me. He turned to Chase. "Because this says otherwise, extensively." Chase laughed. Look, this is just and is great at documentation, but she's listed as the originator on every entry," Mallory interrupted. "From prospecting to proposal to pre-negotiation." The air thickened. My father finally stirred at the head of the table. He reached for his briefcase, opened it, and pulled out the sealed envelope I'd slipped in the night before. His eyes flicked over the label. He opened it. I watched as he unfolded the contents. A memo from legal, dated and notarized, outlining Clause 14.7b of our investor agreement. The clause about misrepresentation. The one that voided all bonus compensation for any officer who lied about portfolio relationships in a formal presentation. My father read it once, then again. I could see it in his face, the math doing itself. Chase had signed the deck. The misstatements were documented. The clause was triggered. This wasn't an HR problem anymore. This was a legal liability. Mallory looked at him. "You approved this version?" My father didn't answer immediately. He just laid the memo down on the table like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Chase's voice cracked. "Greg, sir, I didn't know This is a misunderstanding. She didn't sign the deck," Mallory said flatly. "You did." Dana Park leaned forward. "And if these numbers are fabricated, we're not just talking about forfeiture. We're talking clawbacks, possibly regulatory disclosures." Chase's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I remained silent, steady. I'd waited for this, not out of malice but out of necessity. You don't let someone burn down the house when you built it brick by brick. And now, the smoke was curling under the boardroom door. The silence was dense. No one moved, not the investors, not the execs, not the note-taking paralegal whose pen had stilled mid-word. Chase looked like he'd swallowed a marble. Eyes glassy, lips twitching, sweat just starting to break beneath his carefully powdered jawline. My father exhaled like someone had just turned gravity back on. "You signed a pitch," he said slowly, deliberately, "that voids your own bonus and exposes this firm to investor liability." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The weight of it landed with the kind of finality you hear before the credits roll on a courtroom drama. Across the table, Grant Mallory leaned in slightly, elbows on the oak like he was cozying up to the last line of a story he'd already guessed the ending to. "You brought him in for what, exactly?" My father didn't answer. Not right away. He just looked at the folder on the table, his hands folded tight enough to turn the knuckles white. Behind his eyes, I could see the crash playing out. The emails he ignored, the warnings he dismissed, the trust he misplaced, not just in Chase. In silence, Chase tried to speak. I didn't know you didn't care," Dana Park cut in, calm and lethal. "There's a difference." A low voice at the end of the table, Jim Farrell, board chair, cleared his throat. "We're calling an emergency personnel review." Immediately, Chase stiffened. "Wait, what? Can we talk offline?" "This doesn't have to be, Linda," Jim said, not unkindly. "Would you step outside for a moment?" I nodded, pushed back my chair, gathered my folder, quietly, professionally. As I crossed the room, Chase turned toward me, something panicked behind his eyes. I didn't meet his gaze, just walked past him like he was a broken copier, not my problem anymore. The heavy glass door clicked shut behind me. Then, a second later, I heard it click, locked, not just closed. They were locking me out of his firing. I leaned against the hallway wall, calm, unshaken. It wasn't petty. It wasn't cruel. It was surgical. Let them clean their own mess now. I waited. Listened to the muffled sound of raised voices, a chair scraping, someone, probably Chase, talking way too fast. It lasted all of 5 minutes. Then the door opened. Grant Mallory stepped out, smoothing his jacket. He didn't smile. Just handed me a card with a handwritten note across the top. "We want you running the fund's rollout," he said. Board already agreed. "Got the one thing nobody else in that room has." I raised an eyebrow. "Documentation?" He snorted, "Competence." I slipped the card into my folder. "Understood." Then I smiled just slightly and said, "Sure. But next time I bring my own water." He chuckled once, shook my hand, and walked off. I stood there in the hallway, the hum of the overhead fluorescents mixing with the distant drone of an elevator. No celebration, no grandstanding. Just a clean break. Every humiliation reversed. Every stone lifted with surgical precision and placed exactly where it needed to be. Control wasn't taken back. It was earned. And I didn't need applause. Just a better damn water bottle.